Hello and welcome to our Working Age Forum meeting. We have just finished our breakout groups live here on Zoom, and now we're about to start our next guest speaker interview. And we're building up a series of these interviews. This month, we are joined by Jade Dyer at Ahead, and my colleague Claire is going to take it away. Claire.
Good evening, everybody. Delighted to be with you again and really looking forward to this interview with Jade Dyer from Ahead. And I'm going to hand over to Jade and ask her to do her own introduction, and then I'm going to ask her some questions all about her job and her organisation. So welcome, Jade, to the Working Age Forum.
Thanks, Claire. My name is Jade. I work for Ahead, and my role is a WAM project officer. So I work on the kind of side of the house that is called the WAM program. And I'm going to be kind of talking a little bit about who Ahead are, what we do, and specifically around the WAM program and how we kind of, ring fence positions for graduates with disabilities.
Brilliant. And Jade, we're going to get started. So with that very question, who are Ahead?
Yeah, so we're a non-profit organisation that was formed in 1988 by graduates with disabilities for graduates with disabilities. And we basically work to create inclusive environments for people in education and also for employment for people with disabilities. So our main focus is basically on further education and training, higher education and graduate employment. We would provide information to students and graduates with disabilities, teachers, guidance counsellors, parents on disability issues in education. And we also carry out research relating to the inclusion of students with disabilities and contribute to national policy forums.
Okay, so it's a very comprehensive organisation. And what does Ahead actually stand for? So the Association for Higher Education and Disability, is that correct?
Yeah, and I think we've had a few names now at this stage as well. So yeah, we've finally settled on Ahead over a few years. Yeah.
On Ahead. Okay, so within there's a lot of different people at different stages of employment here in the Working Age Forum. Do you have to be a graduate, a recent graduate, to be able to access the services of Ahead?
Yeah, so you don't have to be a recent graduate at all. You do have to have a minimum level 6, so an NFQ level 6. But you definitely don't have to be a recent graduate. Like we see, especially, you know what I mean, with people with disabilities, sometimes somebody can acquire a disability and there's, a big kind of gap in their employment, and maybe they went to college 20 years ago, you know what I mean, and they have a level 7. That still counts. They're still a graduate to us. So you definitely don't need to be a recent graduate at all.
Okay, brilliant. So level 6 would probably mean that you've come from further education, and anything from a level 7 on, you've been to a third level institute. So what exactly is the WAM program? What does WAM stand for, and what do you do for graduates?
So WAM stands for Willing Able Mentoring. We were established in 2005 and we're funded by the Department of Social Protection. And we placed over 600 placements so far. So basically what we do in a nutshell pretty much is we would talk to employers and kind of identify positions with them. They would give us their job descriptions, and we would disability proof those job descriptions. So we would make sure that, it's the right fonts for people to read if they have dyslexia. I have dyslexia myself. And also we want to make sure that the likes of screen readers and stuff like that will read them properly. So we would do that, and then we would advertise them on our website at ahead.ie. So to apply for those jobs then they're only advertised on our websites because they are ring fenced with us, and to apply for those jobs then you would sign up to our WAM Works database, and basically you just kind of have to fill in a few little questions about yourself. When applying, we do ask if you have any interview accommodations, so interview accommodations for in-person and online. We do see that a lot more people need less interview accommodations for online interviews, you know what I mean, because people are in their own homes, so they don't really need them as often. And we would then, when the kind of applications come through and stuff like that, and we wouldn't ask anyone to disclose their disability at this point. At the point of the needs assessment, that's kind of when we do that. So when an employer you know, goes through the interviews, we also do interview training with the employers, especially, you know, we would know if they were interviewing somebody that might need an ISL interpreter or anything like that. So we would do kind of specific training with them around that. They would interview the graduates, and then they would offer someone a position. And then at that point, we would carry out a needs assessment to identify any accommodations that they may need in the workplace. So basically how we do that is we will get the graduates to fill out what we call a NA1 form. The employer or their manager, who they'll be working with directly, fills out an NA2 form. And basically in the NA2 form, the manager will identify kind of what the job role actually is in a bit more detail, because we know sometimes job descriptions kind of like show like a little bit of what the job is, but really like we want to know what like the graduate is going to be doing on a day-to-day basis, you know what I mean? So we can kind of compare those two things, and then we'll sit down with the graduate for about like an hour to 2 hours, and just have a discussion like about you know, what they may think that they need. Sometimes people don't really like, they're not really sure what accommodations that they need, because it might be like their first job out of college. Some people know exactly what they need as well, you know what I mean? So again, that's why it's like so important to sit down and like have those conversations and see what they need, you know what I mean? And through our experience as well, sometimes we can be like, okay, like, you know, that person, you know, might need Grammarly because they have dyslexia or anything like that. So we can suggest accommodations there. And then we would inform the employer of the accommodations, and we would make sure that they put them in place for the graduate pretty much. And then before the graduate starts, we would do this thing called pre-placement training. So again, like if somebody, you know, is, you know, is a wheelchair user, you know what I mean, just like they might be, that's something that like they would kind of they would be disclosing because they're a wheelchair user, but like we would ask them, you know, do you want, you know, somebody to ask you if you need help, or like, are you okay asking for help, different things like that. And also just like around disclosure in general, like, so we do ask graduates that, you know, they will have to disclose to HR because of the needs assessment process, and their manager. But sometimes, you know, people want to disclose, maybe they have like a mental health illness, a mental illness, they might just want to write that instead of the specific one. That's also okay, like, but we do ask graduates to kind of disclose at that point. But we do train the employers and the mentors around disclosure, so they don't they understand basically that is something that they wouldn't be doing on behalf of the graduate. We also have a mentoring program. So basically the mentoring program is when somebody outside of the graduates kind of team will kind of come in and offer mentoring pretty much. And it's basically somebody that, like, you know, is within the organization that like kind of has that experience, that can share that knowledge with the graduate. And it's always just like a nice way to kind of like get yourself like in there in the company. So for example, I had a mentor when I started with Head here, and especially with like remote working, it was really nice to just be able to kind of sit down with somebody and have a cup of tea and know someone that was like outside of my team, you know what I mean? And also just give me advice on like, you know, like, okay, where do I go to, you know, book a desk for when I'm in the office, or, you know, where do I go to, you know, like book my time off and stuff like that. Like just somebody else that like you can kind of ask those questions with. So yeah, and then like throughout the person's placement as well, we will do regular check-ins. So we check in with the graduate, the manager, and the mentor at different points in the placement. So let's say the placement is about 6 months, we would do a check-in with the graduate after the first week and make sure everything's okay. And then after the first month, we would check in with the graduate, the mentor, and the manager. And then again on 3 months, and then again at the end of their placement. So we're there throughout the whole placement, pretty much, like to be there to support everyone involved, you know what I mean, and like give our advice where it needs to be. So yeah, I think that's pretty much what we do in a nutshell, if I can like cut it down to a few minutes, pretty much.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, it's a really like very in-depth description of everything you do. So I'm going to go back and just deconstruct it a little bit so that we understand how it all works. So do you, in a head, do you proactively look for employers, or do employers know a head exists? And for employers like, I suppose, inclusive employers, they know that you are the organization to go to if they want to hire people with disabilities?
Yeah, at this stage, employers come to us, definitely. We would actually have a list of employers for our next funding round that we know we're not going to have the facilities to actually work with. So we're kind of picking and choosing now at this stage, which is really nice. Like,
wow, so you actually have more employers who want to come on board and be involved in the Willing Able mentoring program than you have the ability to actually bring them on board. That's fantastic. Now, it's only placements that you do. You don't look for full-time employment. You're offering Willing Able mentoring placements. Is that correct?
yeah, and also it kind of depends on the employer as well. So sometimes we do actually have permanent positions that we're advertising. So our minimum is 6 months. Sometimes the placements are 12 months, sometimes they're 2 years, and sometimes they can actually be permanent placements. So again, it actually depends on the employer and what the employer wants to advertise.
Okay, are they paid?
Yes.
So the Willing Able mentoring, even a 6-month program, the graduate gets paid?
Yes.
Okay, and they leave with the wealth of experience, even knowing, as you say, that opportunity of like how the needs analysis, when they fill in the needs analysis and you help them even identify what accommodations they might need, because not every graduate is completely aware of what accommodations they might be able to ask for. So that's they're coming out much more prepared for the workplace.
Yeah, that's it. Like I think like 80% of our graduates find permanent employment. So sometimes, like, you know, our graduates will apply for a 6-month to 12-month placement, and that company actually decides to keep them on. Or just like what you said, they understand the accommodations that they need a little bit more. They are more confident to kind of advocate for themselves as well. That when they're going off looking for employment elsewhere, they're, you know, a lot more successful in that way, you know what I mean? So yeah, I think like the percentage is 80% of our graduates do secure full-time employment.
I think that's the key, isn't it? It's that confidence that you gain from being in a good workplace, an inclusive workplace. You gain the confidence and you're able to advocate for yourself. So when a student, a graduate, is going to WAM, they're very aware really that they will be disclosing their disability, because the employers that are coming into the WAM programs are expecting their graduates to disclose the disability. But you were saying they don't have to disclose until the point of actually going for interview for the job. Is that correct?
No, they don't have to disclose until the needs assessment, and we only do the needs assessment after they've been offered a role. So for interviews, we just ask for any interview accommodations that they need, instead of asking them to actually disclose what their disability is. I know from personal experience, I remember going for jobs. It's very rare that you would even be asked what your accommodations may be, but I remember being asked what my disability was, and they had a list of disabilities, you know what I mean? And I had to tick, like, and it was before I signed a contract, and that can just feel very, you know, nerve-wracking, you know what I mean? So we definitely, and these are type of practices that we want employers to do throughout their whole organization. You know what I mean? Just ask for if somebody needs accommodations, ask them if they need accommodations, but they don't have to disclose their disability until they get to the needs assessment process, and they only get to the needs assessment process after they've been offered the role.
Okay, and is there ever a time when someone's offered a role and they fill in needs assessment 1 and it doesn't really tally with, as you say, the day-to-day job and what really needs to be done?
Yeah,
in the
like
job?
yeah, sometimes, and that's like, you know, the kind of experience from ourselves. Sometimes we can kind of look at a job or a role and then somebody's disability and kind of, you know, look at it and be like, oh, maybe that actually doesn't match, you know what I mean? So for example, if you had someone, I'm going to relate a lot of this to dyslexia just because I'm dyslexic myself, so it's always like easier to kind of do it that way. But for example, if somebody had severe dyslexia, and they were going for a role that was very, you know, data sensitive, and it was like really important for them to get, like, you know, numbers or usernames and stuff like that correct, and their assistive technology wasn't really going to help them in that way. We can't tell anyone like not to go for the role, but we can definitely turn around and say, you know, maybe this might be a disproportionate burden on your employer if they're kind of checking your stuff a lot of the time, and it also might just be too stressful on yourself, you know what I mean? Like that, like we want people to have good experiences, like, you know what I mean, and come out of their placements like feeling good about and confident about themselves, you know what I mean? So sometimes that does happen, where we kind of identify that like the role might not be a good fit in that way.
I think that's a really important conversation to have, because not every job you go for is the right fit, no matter whether you have a disability or not. It may not
Yeah.
be the right fit. So I think that's fantastic that you do that. Everyone here today has some form of vision loss. Have you any examples, any case studies of graduates with vision loss who have been successful in the WAM program?
Yeah, so from a case study of 471 graduates, 10% of them are blind or visually impaired. So yeah, it's a good chunk. And also like, you know, one thing that I like to just highlight with our case studies and stuff like that, with the percentages of people with different types of disabilities that we are finding, a lot of people have more than one disability as well. So again, you could have some sort of, you know, vision impairment and also, you know, autism or like ADHD and stuff like that. So it's not, it wouldn't be surprising for us to get a needs assessment back, you know what I mean, and have like a list of disabilities there as well.
Okay, and before I finish up, because we're going to go to Q&A, and I'm sure there's going to be a number of questions for you. So have you any tips or any advice for the people in the audience today and about the services that you offer in Ahead?
Yeah, I think it's really just go for it, you know what I mean? And like kind of like what we were talking about in our breakout rooms, like be gentle with yourself, you know what I mean? And like I think the WAM program is just a really nice learning experience, you know what I mean? If you're not too sure about, you know, how, you know, you're going to go about interviews, or you're not too sure about like, you know, applying for a job, I feel like the great thing about the WAM program is that like it's okay if it doesn't work out, you know what I mean? So again, going back to our breakout room, like there's always next time, and like we're always here to kind of like give any advice that you need, you know what I mean? And there's always opportunities going up. So like I think really my main advice is just give it a go, sign up to the database, have a look. If there's a job that comes up that suits you, just apply and see how it goes, you know what I mean? Because you never know, you could actually probably get the job, end up having a great experience, you know what I mean, and just like get that kind of confidence built back up, and you know, you might get a job out of it at the end, you know what I mean, which is always really nice too.
It is, and as you say, if it doesn't lead to a job, at least you have that experience that's on your curriculum vitae, and hopefully it'll lead to something else. And if, for example, one of your your WAM experience isn't working out, will that preclude you from applying for another one? Like, how many WAM experiences can you have? Like, you have a 6-month experience, can you finish that and go for another WAM or is every graduate only allowed one?
Yeah, definitely. You can apply for about 2 to 3. I think that's kind of
Okay.
like where we put it. If you have a placement that ends early, and sometimes that does happen, like placements end early, like, you know what I mean. And we do get grads that like get kind of, you know, worried they don't want to be like excluded from any other, you know, opportunities, and that definitely doesn't happen. You know what I mean? Like, again, this is a learning opportunity, you know what I mean, like for everybody involved. So if it doesn't work out kind of like halfway through the placement, that's totally fine. You can withdraw from that and go ahead and apply for another WAM role straight away, and that's absolutely fine.
Brilliant. You know, I have another 100 questions, but I'm going to open it to the floor. So is there anybody in the audience who